My guest today is Carla Harvey, and she is not your average death care professional. Alongside her background in embalming and funeral directing, she is an internationally acclaimed frontwoman in heavy metal, bringing a unique blend of expertise and passion to the world of death care. Now, after earning her Associate of Science in Mortuary Science and her Bachelor of Science in Mortuary Management, Carla embarked on a journey to redefine the way we approach death and grief. Now, recognizing the need for creative and non traditional support, she became certified as a grief coach and a bereavement specialist. Now, in her 17 years of navigating the death industry, Carla has witnessed firsthand the transformative power of embracing mortality and facilitating grief. Now, driven by her own experiences in both the funeral home and on stage, in 2016, Carla founded Good Grief, a bereavement center tailored to the unique needs of rockers and alternative communities worldwide. So, through Good Grief, she provides a safe space for individuals to explore their grief, mental health, in a very supportive and understanding environment. And Carla Harvey is more than just a death care professional. She's a force of change or for change in an industry that is ripe for evolution. And Carla's current role is Partner Success Manager for innovative death care company Parting Stone, which we will be talking about today. So let's welcome both heavy metal rocker and death care expert Carla Harvey to the show. Welcome, Carla.
Hi, how are you? That
I'm
is that is
doing
a nice intro. I wish I could be introduced like that always.
A lot of people don't know this, and for those that do, I created and directed a heavy metal guitar show called Guitar Asylum a few years back. So I know what heavy metal is, and have had the opportunity to hang backstage with some of the biggest bands in the world. But Carla, I grew up in the funeral business. I mean, I lived in two funeral homes by the time I was 5 years old. So none of that environment ever bothered me. My father was a funeral director. He was also an embalmer as well. And, that was back in the day when the town's ambulance service was also at the funeral home. But for you, what drew you to mortuary science before your career in heavy metal? I mean, is it death metal
Yeah.
to death care?
The two aren't related, surprisingly. I always get a lot of questions. Well, you must have done that because you're into heavy metal. And it wasn't at all the case. As a kid, I grew up really fascinated by death and dying. My grandpa died when I was very young, and I remember being he was very sick before he died. And I remember being fascinated with the process of being terminally ill and dying, because one minute he was this man that I looked up to so much and he was strong and he'd swoop me up in his arms, and then he was frail and laying in a bed, and as a child 4 or 5 years old, and you're watching this happen and no one's really explaining to it, what's going on to you because they don't think you can handle it. But kids are very inquisitive and they want to know and they want to understand. So I kind of tried to seek out answers myself. I questioned why my pets would pass away, why my hamsters died, why my dogs would die, why grandpa died. I was fascinated with medical books as soon as I could read. And that's just something that I always kind of took with me throughout my childhood. In fact, I have this coping mechanism where if someone that I loved had hurt me, for instance, my dad um, left when we were very young, I would imagine that that person had just died because it was a lot easier for me as a kid to kind of accept that than they're just out of your life. So I was always fascinated again with science, death, dying, the emotional and physical aspects of it. And I didn't know that funeral service could be a career. No one tells you that in school when you're interested in science when you're a kid. In fact, I'm so old that when I went to school, they would send in flight attendants to tell the girls at school how cool their career, working for the airlines could be. No one really talked about science careers or anything like that. And of course, I didn't grow up with anyone in my family who was in funeral service, which is normally the way that one might become acquainted with it. So I had to find it out myself. And, I had always been a musician. I moved to LA to play music in 1998. Had a bunch of modeling jobs, acting jobs, and I became really disenchanted with the whole entertainment business. And I saw an ad for this mortuary science program. And I thought, mortuary science program? You can go to school for this? You can get a degree in this? And I enrolled right away, got accepted, and the rest is history. I fell in love with mortuary science. I got my first job as an apprentice embalmer and a funeral director right out of mortuary school. But it was just life changing for me that this thing that I had been fascinated with, I could be a part of it and help people at the hardest time of their life.
You here in Houston, Texas, we have the Funeral Museum, and if you ever come to Houston, you're going to have to go. It breaks down so much history, and and I love talking to people who really realize that there is a business in death care.
Yeah,
And like you said, and you alluded to it, and I know this for a fact because back in the day, many of the funeral homes were always family owned.
yeah,
So it was always generation to generation until all of the big corporations started coming in and buying them all up. I never had an interest in doing it because my father, he was a funeral director, uh, embalmer. And again, like as I mentioned, that's when the ambulance service was in the same funeral home. So he would do that if there was an emergency. So I was used to sirens. I was used to people coming in and out because of funerals. And so that never ever bothered me. And but for you, where did the transition happen? I mean, did you leave music to go strictly into the funeral service, or were you
did. I
balancing both at the same time?
So I had come, this is years ago now. So it's quite interesting because I had come to a point living in LA. You get opportunities and they're snatched away from you. You make money, then you lose your money. And I was so tired of the entertainment business. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to play music anymore. I don't want to act anymore. It's too much. Nothing is ever going to happen with it. So again, that's when I went to mortuary school and I was committed to only working in funeral service from then on out. Well, after a couple of years of working, I got my dream job at a very big mortuary in LA. And at the same time, I got an opportunity to start my band and go on tour for the first time in my life. So I had to make a choice in that moment. I've committed myself to this death care career. Do I drop it all, everything that I've worked so hard for in school, and go on tour with this band and just see what happens one final time? Or do I just stick on my path? And I chose music in that moment, and that was 2009 that I really committed back into music. In 2012, we went on our like we were touring nonstop, so there's no way I could work in funeral service anymore. Well, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me because our career just exploded. And so I got the best of both worlds. I had gotten my education. I had gotten a taste of working in death care, and then I could still live out my dream. And I am so grateful for that. The last 15 years of my life have been spent on stage entertaining people in a capacity that I never dreamed I would have, especially after so much disappointment in my early years in LA. So I got to do that. I got to be a rock star. I got to do all the things. And then 15 years later, my mind kind of changed again.
Well, is that why you desired to step away from the butcher babies and then return to the death care industry?
So there's so much that goes into being in a band, especially as you get older and your life changes. You have relationships, you have a partner, I have a stepdaughter. And the idea all of a sudden of being on the road 10, 12 months out of the year became just a lot to handle. And, in a band, there's 5 people, and half of those people may feel like they want to be on the road constantly all the time. And then some people are like, maybe it's halftime. So it doesn't, always work out for the greater good of everybody.
Well,
Um,
you're one of the rare ones because I know so many people in the metal genre, and you're right. There are people that literally just want to live on the road and tour constantly. And of course, I know that's where most of the money is made in that genre, not technically in album sales, but it's through touring. But then there's those that are, it seems rare. And you're in that group where you actually have a career outside of music that you can literally fall back on and continue to make a living.
Yeah, my dad said something to me once years ago when we had started the bands, and he meant it in jest. He said, I saw you singing on the internet, don't quit your day job. And at the time, I was like, that's the nastiest thing you could say. But I'm glad I never quit my day job. In fact, all the while, the last 15 years, while I've been on tour, I've been getting more education and getting more certifications so that I could continue on, because I always had that need to still be in death care in some aspect. I founded my grief coaching company so that I could still be of service to people who need me in that capacity. It was very important to me. And then, last year I was on this major summer tour. We were playing sheds, the outdoor amphitheaters, and it was wonderful. And every day you're up on stage singing your heart out. But man, I saw this post about Parting Stone looking for a partner success manager, and I thought, man, I want to apply for this. I want to see what happens if I can take this job. Again, there's just so many moments in life where you really have to assess what's best for you. Life
Ye-
changes. And also another thing about the entertainment industry and the music industry, it's not the same as it was for musicians 20 years ago, 10 years ago. My future husband's in a legacy band. They never have to worry about having a real job ever. But bands my size, you're not breaking the bank. You're not really earning a livable wage unless you're on the road 12 months out of the year. You can't
Oh, yeah.
support yourself. So I've always had other jobs, whether I'm painting pictures for people or doing my grief coaching on the side. That's a day job that I've been able to maintain throughout my career with music. It was a necessity as well as a passion, because otherwise I'd be couch surfing somewhere. I have nothing. So it's really hard to live passionately and just follow your dreams without something to fall back on or something to assist you. And I tell this to a lot of people, and some people are like, no, man, I don't want a backup plan. This is the only thing I'm ever going to do. I always thought about, okay, this is awesome right now. What about when I'm 60? What am I going to do then? Because my mom is 72 and she's working all the time still. She loves working. I can't imagine. We're not 70-year-olds that are going to be sitting on a couch, or 60-year-olds that aren't going to be out doing something. Life is different. We're still going to be working. Um, we have to do something. And I'd rather have that be a career rather than a job that I'm forced to have to sustain
You're
myself in my
yeah,
older
you're
years.
you're correct because not everybody's the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And of course, I think that Keith Richards must have some type of mortality that's never ending. But but you're right. There are there's different levels, and I know of so many people that have no backup plan. But you're right. If you're in a particular music genre and you get to be 60, are you still going to be wanted? And it's hard. And like you said, music industry has changed big time. Now, when it comes to death care, and especially because when I think of death care, we're thinking of straight laced people, no personality, very subdued. But here you are, the complete opposite of what we would think of somebody in death care. So it's pretty cool and refreshing. But what is your vision for the future of death care, and how do you think your unique background can continue to influence it?
Well, the future of death care is getting pretty cool. I'll tell you that much. I travel around for Parting Stone to funeral homes all over the country. And what I'm seeing is the veil is lifting. People are not just going traditional anymore. I have this thing about autonomy in death and dying. I'm very passionate about it. And I believe that um, being able to kind of choose what you want for your funeral services, how you want to be memorialized, what you want to be after you pass, all of those things really help keep your autonomy during the death and dying process. And funeral homes are realizing that they have to be open to new ideas because people are changing. Even with social media, if you think about it, we've all been able to show the world exactly who we are through social media now, through our little pages, through our Instagrams and Facebooks. We are able to portray ourselves to the world the way that we want to be seen. And the same should hold true for death care. We should be recognized, how we want to be recognized in our final moments. So I'm seeing funeral homes really open to these crazy ideas for memorials rather than the visitation and the viewing from this time to this time, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to go to a restaurant and somberly eat together. It's so different. It's the funeral director world is very it's getting very female, which is amazing.
Is it
So
really?
yes, in
I didn't realize that.
yes, I'd say that 90% of the funeral homes I visit are predominantly full of female funeral directors, which is incredible to see. I mean, it's incredible to see young blood in any aspect working in the funeral industry. But of course, love to see women in science-driven careers. And for those of you out there who don't know how science-driven, funeral service is, you are making literally doing chemical equations to mix your embalming fluid. You have to know all your anatomy, pathology, physiology. It's very science heavy, math heavy, chemistry heavy. It's not what you'd think. So it's so cool to see so many women in the field.
Well, I have a question because the cremation industry has grown so much in the last few years. Why are people choosing cremation over traditional burial in a casket? Is it cost?
So everyone seems to think it's cost, but it's not always cost. It's just something that is right for people. It's a better footprint, and of course the cost of a burial can be $15,000. We've got a lot of direct cremation services now for under $1,000. But I will say this, um, even with direct cremation, people aren't doing it just to have a cheap method of disposition. They want to find value in something. They just want to find what it is they find value in. And that's where Parting Stone comes in as being so revolutionary in the funeral industry to me, because we're giving the family back the remains in a form that they've never seen. Families usually, when they chose cremation back in the day, it's kind of a scary thing. You get an urn that you may or may not take out of the trunk of your car because you're afraid to hold it and look inside of it, or you're putting the urn on a mantle or in a basement or an attic somewhere and not wanting to look at it because You don't know what's going to be under that lid. Is there going to be bone fragments? What's going to be in there? Um, Now we're giving people a complete alternative. They have the chance to get the remains back in solidified form. So they're these beautiful stones. I actually have some right here. I'll
Yeah,
show
I
you.
actually went to the website and it's a
Yeah.
very beautiful way. How do they create those stones?
So the stones are all hand formed in our lab. We have a small amount of binder in with the ashes. So this is unlike anything else that you've seen in cremation. We're not a little teaspoonful of ashes inside of a piece of glass. That's lovely, but that's not what we are. We're not a product. We aren't, a piece of jewelry with cremains inside of it. We are the cremains, which is so cool. Because imagine the grieving process like this. You've got, your dad's stones here, and you can put one in your pocket if you're having a bad day. If you need to have a conversation with your dad and he's passed, you can hold this and just say, I miss you and I'm having a hard day. And if you were here, I know you'd know just what to say. If you're traveling somewhere that your person had never been to, take them along with you and put them in a special spot. I had a gentleman share some photos of his wife's stones all over the world. And he was so excited to be able to, take a stone of hers and sneak it into the catacombs of Paris, take her to the Eiffel Tower. And in fact, anytime that he has a friend going somewhere overseas or somewhere cool, he gives a stone to that person and has that person take his wife somewhere special. So it's just such a cool thing. As a grief coach and a funeral service, provider over the years, I think this is the coolest thing right now. And if you're going to choose cremation, I think you got to choose these as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And because it's a more beautiful way, because I know people who when they're going to do cremation and they take the ashes, they put them in an urn. And you're right. Where are they going to display the
Yeah.
urn? In the open, in the attic, in the basement, or for some, I know that they actually do the burial of the urn in the
Mhm.
cemetery. So, but this way with the parting stone, it's more, it's just a beautiful way of doing it. And I have to ask, has anybody ever taken one of the smaller stones and maybe drilled a hole and turned it into a small necklace?
Oh yeah, we see all kinds of things being done with the solidified remains, necklaces, art pieces. People do beautiful works of art on them. And also, may I add too, with the scattering, like when you try to scatter, real ashes or cremated remains in the way that we normally get them back, it's messy. So if you haven't had that experience, it's not always pleasant. I don't know if you watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I do, and I love the housewife shows. They had a fun one on recently where one of the girls was taking her mentor's ashes to Europe and spreading them, and the ashes, of course, blew back in all these women's faces, and they got ashes in their lip gloss, stuck in their lip gloss, and their fancy handbags. And I was giggling because it's like that wouldn't have happened with parting stone. It's just such a clean, beautiful alternative. And it's really bringing back meaning to having those remains become a part of your life, a part of your household. I hate the old way of thinking about letting go after someone dies. People are a huge part of your life, of your existence. When someone passes away, you don't just want to let it go. You want to be able to still have a moment, have a conversation. And of course there's grief disorders that are not not right, but for most people, it's super healthy to be able to have a conversation with the person that you loved, share the stones with someone that you loved. And they're conversation facilitators too. People are afraid to talk about their person, but these stones, being able to hold them and say, hey, remember when dad did this? Or remember how much dad loved hiking? We should go hike with him right now. I don't, it's just such a great thing.
No, it is it is the most innovative. It's it's a genius way to memorialize someone, and but you touched on something that's probably the most important thing. You can still have closeness to someone that you've lost
Yeah.
with a parting stone, where you can't do it with if someone's in the cemetery or their ashes are in an urn sitting on your shelf. Yes, they're there, but the thought is completely different than if you had, let's say, I've seen it on the Parting Stone website. Maybe it's a glass bowl of some sort with these stones laid in the bowl in a very nice, peaceful manner. It's very,
Yeah.
very beautiful. It doesn't remind you of death at all. And you bring up the funny story about the ashes. I mean, how many people have actually done that? They go out, say something very nice about their loved one to spread their ashes, and then they end up wearing those ashes.
Yeah. And I shouldn't laugh, but it's a little funny.
Yeah,
Maybe
well,
maybe it adds a little comedy to the whole thing because we're all gonna die. You might as well laugh about it a little bit, right?
right. But the thing that I love about the parting stones is that it brings, I mean, I'm sure that maybe someone out there who has had the parting stones created where maybe they go in maybe it's the Rocky Mountains or something, and then
Yeah.
there's a creek, and then they take one of the stones and then they add it to the creek because maybe
Yeah.
their loved one loved to fish there or something. And that to me is just a more beautiful way to remember someone.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful for not only the person who's grieving, but for the decedent. Because I would like to know that I was placed somewhere that I loved. I would love to just have that. It would make me feel safe at a time when I know it was my end, that people were going to do that for me. It makes me sad to think about it.
Well, yeah,
I get very emotional.
but Carla, I literally, because during the pandemic, so many people passed away, but a lot of them, I think, from what I've understood, many chose cremation over traditional burial, mostly because, like you said, they picked for them it was a cost situation, so they went with a route that was less than 1,000. The cremation's done, then you're handed a plastic bag full of ashes, and then you're going to be thinking about what container to put them in, and it's
Yeah.
still ashes at the end of the day. But with the parting stone, okay, so you team up with funeral homes. So let's say someone goes to the funeral home, their loved one's passed away, they choose cremation. How does it go from that point to parting stone?
Well, we think a great way for the director to approach it. And now, lately, I'll preface this by saying we've got a lot of families that are finding us online, on TikTok and social media, and going into the funeral home and saying, I heard about this. How do I get it? And then the funeral home calls and partners up with us. But in general, what we would love to see and what the future looks like, is every time you go in and choose cremation, you will be asked, would you like to receive back ashes or stones? Or would you like to receive cremated remains or solidified remains? That educates the public that this exists, because we're still new enough where if the funeral director doesn't tell people about us, then maybe they won't know. And the worst thing to happen when a family leaves a funeral home is for them to come back a month later and say, why didn't you tell me this was an option for me? But that's how we would love to be presented, and that's how we are presented. And then the family can make that choice. And if a family wants to scatter the ashes, it's a perfect choice. If they want to share them with a multitude of people, it's a perfect choice. If they want to travel with them, guess what? You can take these in your backpack and travel around the world without all the paperwork that makes it uncomfortable to go through TSA with, traditional cremated remains. So it's just a better way, in my opinion.
I think this is the most innovative idea I have ever seen, because death, when we think about death, it's always sad. But when I look at the parting stone, it's not sad at all. I mean,
No.
to me, the most perfect word for this, it's it's just a beautiful way. And I can
Yeah.
see that when more funeral homes tap into this, I think most families, if they are going to choose cremation and when they're given the choice, I think they're going to go with the stones as long as the person didn't leave in their will to scatter their ashes over something.
Yeah.
So I think the stone is going to be the preferred choice. And wow, to come into an industry and to be an innovator in this industry, that's
It's
extremely
hard.
rare.
It's hard. That's why I say, after being in the industry and doing every job that you could imagine for the industry, from removals to embalming to funeral directing, this has been the coolest thing that I've seen. I was also a crematory operator as well. So this is special. And I'll tell you a story too. When I started embalming, one of my dogs passed away, and they were cremated. I had never seen ashes myself. And even though I was an embalmer, I was terrified to open up and look at the ashes. I finally did it one day, and I was like, okay, that's what it looks like. But I just hadn't. I worked in a Catholic funeral home, and I had really, at that time, this is back in 2007, I didn't have any experience with working with cremated remains. This is so much more peaceful than seeing your person or your pet in that form. And just to be able, again, I can't stress enough, just to hold it in your hand and use it like a worry stone if you're having a bad day. It's just so peaceful.
Yeah, and that's the coolest thing about this is that even if you're holding it in your hand, it's not morbid at all.
No,
There's an emotional connection. Well, there's a never-ending emotional connection. And I have to ask, and I guess it depends on the person, how many stones are created from ashes?
that's a good question. So it's about 60 to 80 if you do the full set of remains. We don't have to do the full set of remains. You can choose to do half. We can even do as little as a quarter cup. We've done a lot of infants, which is very healing for a family who loses an infant to be able to hold the stones in their hand. I think it's a beautiful service in that instance. But yeah, you can get up to 60 to 80. And it's so cool because then everybody can have a piece of the person they loved. If you've got a big family, or if someone was a pillar of the community and had a lot of people that love them, they can have one of those stones too. We see people having a big pile of the stones at memorials and allowing folks to go up and pick a stone that calls to them and be able to take it home. And I find that in the past, a lot of people are left out of that process of feeling like they're part of something, or they can have a piece. When Lemmy died from Motorhead, since you're a heavy metal guy yourself, you'll
Yeah.
know Lemmy. He gave out bullets of ashes. People, his closest friends and the community received little bullets filled with his ashes, which I think is really cool. I think it is so important for people who were close to you to have something.
Yeah, and it's yeah, because with an urn full of ashes, some people don't want to be, even though the person may have left into their will that they want them scattered, but then there are family members that don't want to scatter the ashes because then they feel completely separated
Yeah,
from them. And so they would rather have the urn sitting on a shelf. But the parting stone, that is, to me, that would be the way to go. And at the same time, multiple family members would be able to have a stone for themselves, because usually some people don't want to be separating ashes.
yeah.
And so this is a perfect this I think this would end a lot of family arguments after the fact. So I think this actually brings peace, calmness, and unity to many families if a loved one has chosen this. Now, let me ask you this because you said if someone did the full ashes, so you're going to get maybe 60, 80 stones.
Mhm.
How long is the process from cremation to the stones? What's the timeline?
It's about a 10-week turnaround. So, and actually, that might sound like a long time, but what I've found is that when a family gets the cremated remains in an urn a couple days after, the body's been cremated, it's still a very painful time to receive those ashes. It's awkward. Again, that's why there's stories about widows driving around for 10 years with the husband in the trunk of the car in the urn, because it's a lot to take your person home in that urn after a couple days. It's weird, right? So 10 weeks down the road, you open this beautiful box with these beautiful stones in it. And that's a whole different experience because you're at a different place in your grief. And these are healing and they're beautiful and you can hold them in your hand. So it's just a completely different experience altogether. So the timeline, I think, is actually where it should be.
I agree with that. I agree with that because that makes complete sense. Now, I also understand that you were certified in other forms of burial, things like green burial. What is that for those that do not know?
So, green burial is just a very natural way of disposition. You're not using any machinery to dig the holes for, you're oftentimes just buried in a shroud and put in the earth. So your body would just become one with the earth. You're not in, a $10,000 casket, and you're just, again, just placed with the earth. It's another way, again, to just be to lower your footprint, and people who are excited about that will be excited about natural burial. Unfortunately, it's really hard to find places that are on board with it. I worked for a funeral home here in Illinois for a bit, and I had mentioned my interest in kind of facilitating that for people, and I was laughed at a little bit, unfortunately.
Well,
But there are some.
are there other alternative forms of burial besides cremation, traditional casket, or maybe I guess green burial? Is there?
Yeah, you've got terramation, which is awesome, where your body becomes soil. That is a really cool process, and I'm not completely up on how it all works. Um, but you're put in a pod, and your body just becomes part of the soil, and it just kind of speeds up the decomposition process. And I think that's fascinating. And there's aquamation, there's alkaline hydrolysis, which is another way to cremate someone. You call it a water cremation. Most people who aren't in funeral service would call it water cremation, and it's basically water, lye, chemicals that kind of disintegrate the body rather than incinerating the body. So that's really neat as well. Um, yeah, there's a lot more choices nowadays. I think water cremation appeals to people because it sounds gentler
Yeah,
than
it's
the
instead of
traditional
the
like.
fiery furnace.
Yeah, I think people are a little bit turned off when it comes to cremation when they think of the picture in their head like that. But yeah, so there's aquamation, terramation, cremation, traditional burial, green burial, and the future, like I said, for autonomy in death care looks really bright because you can literally decide what you want. And I think it really does help mentally with the idea that you're going to die if you can control the circumstances around it a bit.
Very, very much so. Now you mentioned that you're not done making music, correct?
No way. No way. Um, I am done with being on the road 12 months out of the year, 10 months out of the year. But I love to create music. In fact, I've written about 10 10 songs this year for an album that I'm working on, and I'm really excited about it. I still want to tour. I still love being in front of crowds, and I'm definitely going to do that. And I just I can't wait to get back up there in front of people.
So you sticking with the metal genre?
You know, it's funny because I thought that I would, and then the way songs started to pour out of me, it wasn't metal anymore. I wouldn't say that I'm completely dismissing, writing any more metal songs, but I feel this weird feeling the past 6 months where all different things want to come out of me. And I don't like to limit myself in anything. So I'm going to try new stuff.
You know, it was so funny. I was on Instagram last night and realized that Disturbed recorded Sound of Silence 8 years ago. And I'm thinking, see, I've always loved the fact where one genre decides to step outside that genre and do
Yeah.
something different. Because to me, it makes fans go, oh, I didn't know they could do that. Because then it
Yeah.
just adds a more of a mystique to it. And with someone like that who did that, it gives a whole nother idea or look when people think of what metal bands are.
Oh,
I just thought it
completely.
was, so that's the reason I was kind of wondering if you were sticking with metal or not, because to
Yeah.
me, I'm like, hey, music is music. I mean, I've seen
Definitely.
where rockers went country and vice versa, and I don't think anybody needs to be stuck in one genre. If they feel it,
Yeah.
sing it.
I feel that people are more open nowadays to musicians switching genres. I've never liked to be put in a box unless it's a casket, I guess. But I've never liked to be put in a box with anything that I do in life, and I don't think most people do. So it's funny when people get so angry when you want to try new things. But as you evolve as a person and you want to try new things, you owe it to yourself to do it, whether one person likes it, 50 people like it, or the masses like it, And most metal musicians are multifaceted people in their interests and their in the music they grew up listening to. And so are most listeners. So I'd say be graceful on both ends. If you're a fan of music, let people explore. I feel like the most important thing is when you are exploring to make it authentic. Don't bust out a country song because you feel that that's what everyone's doing right now. That's what they want. So let me just make something up real quick that people will like. People can sense that that's, not authentic and they don't want to be a
Yeah.
part of it. But when you're truly exploring sides of yourself, it shows. And I'm hoping that's what'll happen with me.
Well, I can't wait till you get the songs recorded, and when you do, you're gonna have to come back so we can talk about all of the songs. I mean, I've hung around with so many metal artists that what I wish a lot of people would realize is that artists are some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. Some
True.
of them know music so well, and I mean, not only can they read it, but I mean, and you know this to be true. How many metal artists can take a classical piece and it's nothing for them to break down and play it?
Yeah.
So, and they know their history. I know some that can read music. I know those that don't. I know some that play by ear, and the list goes on. And it is the coolest group of people I've ever hung around with, and their creativity never ends.
I agree with that. No, metalheads are, again, there's so much math, I think, in metal music. So maybe that's part of the nerdiness, but I know so many brilliant metal musicians, and it's awesome. It's awesome to be
Yeah.
part of such a cool genre.
Oh man, if you sit there and you're talking about shredding or arpeggios or whatever it comes down to, uh, metal is where it's at. But ladies and gentlemen, we, Carla Harvey and I have talked about death care industry. And the death care industry, well, it is changing with innovative ways to remember your loved ones or our loved ones. And Parting Stone is one such company. You need to go to partingstones.com and learn how they
Parting
make.
stone.
Oh, Parting Stone. I'm glad you said that, because it'll be at the bottom of your screen there.
Yep.
Partingstone.com, correct?
Yep.
All right. And ladies and gentlemen, and you can learn how to make cremation more beautiful and a new way of keeping your loved ones closer than ever before. And Carla, I have had a great time with you today learning about this brand new innovative way to remember our loved ones. And hey, when you get the new album out, you got to come back.
I will for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very, very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, again, partingstone.com. It's a beautiful website. And just like Carla explained that we talked about today, when you go on that website, you are instantly going to know how beautiful this this idea, this innovative way of remembering your loved ones really is. So again, go to partingstone.com, learn more. And I guess, Carla, for those that do have or have had remains, I guess, sitting in an urn on their shelf, they can actually go to one of the local funeral homes, or can they
Yes.
just go to partingstone.com directly?
You can go to partystone.com directly, but you can also walk into your local funeral home or the funeral home that you have worked with and say, "Hey, I want to get dad stoned." Tell no, go into your funeral home and tell them that you want party stone. There is no expiration date on making stones out of cremated remains. So please bring your urns in, send them in, and try it. It is just a remarkable, remarkable service.
And does Parting Stones also, Parting Stones do pets?
We definitely do pets, so pets and people.
All right. Well, that, you really made something funny about this, because it's almost like, well, if Mama wasn't a drinker, at least we can get her stoned.
Yeah. I dream of having a Get Grandma Stone shirt for Parting Stone. Like I said, sometimes you got to have a little humor in things to get through the day, right?
I am all for humor, and you know what? You may have just created a whole brand new industry for the funeral homes and creating T-shirts. I know, ladies and gentlemen, that they may sound morbid to some of you, but you got to have a sense of humor even to the very end. So again, go to partingstone.com, learn more about the beautiful way to remember and memorialize your loved ones, and you can keep them close, even into your pocket. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. I'll be back with more.